Positive feedback loop. Three, two, one.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Positive Feedback Loop podcast, where we talk about a variety of things, including culture, technology, history, and we try to learn a lot about how we think about these topics and how people in general think about things. So my name is Ray.
And this is Stephanie.
And I'm Luis.
Right, and today's topic is actually about desserts and sweets and different types of delicacies that contain sugar, basically.
I know fruits have fructose, but I forget what it has
There's
exactly.
like saccharin, glucose,
Well,
fructose.
Yeah, I mean it's monosaccharides versus polysaccharides, but yes, the idea is that we're going to be talking about things that are sweet, and not in the emotional sense, more specifically in terms of things that we like to eat that are very sugary.
What's your favorite dessert, Luis? I'm just wondering.
Probably cheesecake.
Cheesecake.
Which I've heard is a confusing one because it's not really a cake.
Yeah, it's a pie.
Yeah, it's a pie. Which, I mean, I guess I kind of embrace the not quite what it seems quality of it. But I just really like the fact that it's not a real cake.
It's funny that you bring up cheesecake because that is my birthday cake. I've had cheesecake every year of my life as my birthday cake.
Wait, were you assigned a birthday cake at birth?
Yeah.
Is it like a birthstone?
So my mother had a friend who was from India and had never had cheesecake, and I was turning 1, and my mother was going to celebrate my birthday.
Yeah.
And so she decided, well, let's make cheesecake since you've never had cheesecake before. And then it became a tradition where every year of my birthday I had a different cheesecake. So when I got older, I had to think of different cheesecakes. Like different cheesecakes had to be made because every cheesecake had to be unique every year of my birthday, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I had a very different experience with cakes growing up. We did not have great access to good cakes when I was growing up in Cuba. So my experience has been that I very much dislike traditional birthday cakes. The white cake with maybe like some frosting with white frosting and
Sprinkles?
No.
Candles?
Yes, we did have candles. We actually would celebrate the birthdays with everyone, like all the kids that had birthdays around the same time. We would pool all the resources together to have all the birthdays at once. I happened to be the middle point, so birthdays were celebrated on my birthday. So I was obviously the special one. Clearly, I'm the best.
You had a cake on your actual birthday.
Everyone else was just coming to my birthday and celebrating that they also got older or were about to. In all seriousness, I've never had a good relationship with traditional birthday cakes. I've always enjoyed cheesecake or ice cream cake, really things that are cake-like, but not really cake.
Like fruit cakes, would you say?
I like fruit cakes, yeah. Although I am allergic to a lot of fruit, so they're a little more dangerous for me. But it's nothing deadly.
Oh, the danger of cake for
Yes.
What's your favorite fruit, Stephanie?
My favorite fruit?
Or dessert, sorry.
Oh, dessert. Well, I consider fruit to be a dessert.
Fruit could count.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do have a lot of favorite desserts that are high in fruit, like tarts. Where they have a crust and then a little custardy, and then they have the beautifully designed mosaic of fruits on the top. It's one of my favorites.
How about you, Ray?
What
we're sharing?
I like this. There's a pistachio cake that it's kind of a Turkish cake, and I think it's delicious. It's like chocolate with pistachios in it, and it's layered, and inside is almost like pistachio filling cream, and on top you have whole pistachios.
Do you know what that's called?
I don't know, pistachio chocolate cake.
Interesting. I don't think I've had that.
I'm a big fan of pistachios. You
guys would love the cake.
I would likely love this cake. And something that I love that does have pistachios or other nuts in it is the Spanish turrón.
Oh, turrón, yes.
Which I first had when I lived in Spain.
Wait, which type of turrón? Are you talking the soft turrón?
The soft
Okay.
turrón.
So for listeners who may not be aware, turrón is a traditional Spanish and Latin American dessert. Generally, it can come in generally two forms. They're the most common. You have hard as the devil's steel, and then you have soft and mushy. Those are like the two things.
So the United States has a version of Touron, and it's the Big Hunk. Have you ever had Big Hunk? It's an old candy bar that it's hard to find anymore, and it's kind of this white nougat with nuts in it. And it comes in a dark brown wrapper, and in white letters it says Big Hunk.
Never heard of it.
It for my first impression of that name was that it sounded like something you'd find at a bachelorette party.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm sure they
in the shape of something. Let's not go there.
This is a children's show. This is a family entertainment.
We should talk about cartoons then. Kidding.
Well, desserts actually.
Yeah.
You would think lots of children, they love sweets and desserts. Like getting a candy bar when I was a child was like a win, like for the day. Personally, I think that the Crunch Bar was my favorite as a child because I remember seeing commercials with Shaquille O'Neal just crunching it, and I thought that was just the greatest thing, and I totally dig that. What's your favorite chocolate bar or candy bar, guys?
I don't really eat. To be honest, I don't have much of a sweet tooth. I've never had.
I don't now either. I just feel like I used to, but now I honestly like savory foods. It's the way to go.
All right, I'm the one with the sweet tooth, so let me explain to you
Let
the best
Stephanie
candies in the world.
explain.
Okay. From a global perspective too, I'm very.
Global
Our listeners in Shanghai and
Nicaragua
and South Africa, everyone's just paying attention to what you say.
Yes. Okay. So the best candy bar in Australia is the Violet Crumble.
Sounds nice.
The Violet Crumble is this beautiful honeycomb candy bar covered in chocolate, and so it has this like crisp crunch because it's just honeycomb. This yellow, hard, brittle. It looks like styrofoam, but it's honey sweet. That's the best. And then another candy that I like that is also kind of in the era of the Big Hunk is the Abba Zaba, which is white nougat filled with peanut butter filling. It's so good, and the wrapper looks like a taxi cab of olden days, where it's like a yellow and black checkered wrapper. All right, so another candy that I loved when I was a kid are bottle caps. Did you ever have bottle caps?
Sounds familiar.
I mean, I had bottles with caps, but I've never eaten a bottle cap.
So the candy was shaped like a bottle cap, and they were flavored like sodas. So you'd get a grape bottle cap, and it would taste like grape soda. You'd get a root beer, it would taste like root beer, orange soda, etc.
See, I didn't have that much candy growing up. It just was not available to me, so I guess I just grew up and it just became a non-issue. I got here and I was like, I like Halloween. It's a cool holiday. I just don't care for the candy. I can have like 3 pieces of chocolate before I become like sick of chocolate.
That's
I don't know.
fascinating.
Now, I had a question for you guys. Do you think that, just thinking about Halloween now and how, in America, consumerism is such a thing where every candy company basically promotes the crap out of their stuff during Halloween in order to sell it, including Easter and different holidays, but specifically Halloween. Do you think that's moral?
Well, they do the same at Easter, too. Think
Right.
of how much candy is marketed at Easter.
Right, and the things that we know about sugar and candy nowadays, and like it tastes great, and in moderation it's fine, I think, but to target younger people that maybe...
I mean, we grew up in the 90s. You've all seen the commercials. How if you have Go-Gurt, it's extreme, and you'll be cool too. Or there's so many manipulative commercials for kids, and it's gonna be interesting seeing how the fact that no one kind of sees commercials anymore is gonna kind of change that. But I mean, we should all be watching commercials just because that's what keeps websites afloat. And hey, maybe if you're an advertiser and would like to get sponsored on the Positive Feedback Loop podcast, reach out to us.
I will eat all the candy samples you send us.
That's a promise right there.
I will review them all.
But in terms of children and candy, I think it's one of those things where science has shown sugar has impacts on children's development. A lot of time it's used, for example, in infants, it can be used as a way to, as a form of anesthesia, although it doesn't really work. Research has shown that for a lot of procedures, kids are actually given like a sugar solution instead of actual anesthesia because it's simpler and they expect that it stops them from feeling pain, but it doesn't. It does a terrible job at that, and that actually has a really big consequences for children growing up. That's not a result of the sugar itself.
Do they use the sugar in hospitals today as an anesthetic?
I know that at least the research that basically showed this is not much of an issue. I mean that this is an issue came out about in 2010, I think is when it came out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people have changed the way that they do things. But this is mostly for like infants, not like you don't give this to like a 3-year-old because they're gonna cry. But your dependence on sugar and the fact that if you get early access to it, that has huge implications on children because it's such a huge reward for your brain. Your brain loves it. I mean, it rewards everything that your body wants.
Yeah.
But it's not actually what it needs, and at least not in the quantities that we consume it.
Right.
So children become hooked on it really easily.
There's multiple studies providing evidence showing that the activity of sugar or the ingestion of sugar has the same activity in the reward system of the brain as other drugs similar to cocaine does.
Yeah.
Which is quite scary, frankly. And if you look at our evolution and our history of, what we eat, sugar is kind of new. At least refined sugar is pretty new. Yeah, sure, we've eaten fruits and different types of sweets and honey for a long time, but those are not processed, or especially fruits, they contain fiber, which helps with the digestion of it. It helps slow down the digestion. So getting these like spikes in sugar frequently and getting used to it is, I don't know. We're seeing the effects already on an epidemiological scale with obesity becoming a serious
diabetes
issue.
Also
diabetes.
And there's also even like how many people don't know whether their kids have ADHD because their kids consume sugar and they blame it on sugar. It could be the sugar, it could be that they actually have an underlying condition, but if parents are not super keen on it, they might not find out until much later when the children's progress is actually already hampered.
I think what interests me is the ingestion of sugar through beverages. So we often think of sugar as we feed to our children in form of candy. And I was in the supermarket and looking at these chocolate milks that you give to kids and thinking, oh, that's a healthy option, right? And when I looked at the sugar content,
it's insane.
I think there was more sugar than milk in these
I would be surprised.
packages. And I had a friend, we were talking about what advice has your mother given you over the years. And she said one piece of advice her mother had given her was, don't waste your calories on beverages. There is a lot of sugar that we drink and we don't pay attention to. And I think of the people who drink soda all day long thinking it's just this hydrating beverage because they're thirsty, when really they're dehydrating themselves or dehydrating their children that they're giving soda to.
Yeah.
Right? And that they're ingesting candy bars worth of sugar.
Well, it's a really, affordable option though, isn't it? So a bottle of water can cost almost the same as, a can of Coke.
Right.
So, if you're kind of hungry or you need some kind of energy, it's a good option, especially in developing countries where
the water isn't pure enough, you need to drink
Right.
soda. Right.
Yeah, so
I mean, and there's also a lot of the caloric content of so many of these products is insane, and it can come in. I mean, vitamin water. I'm almost certainly has sugar. So many products are marketed as healthy, have insane sugar contents. All the juices, literally any juice you find has huge amounts of sugar, oftentimes added in after the fact. And I often, for example, there's one juice in particular I rail against a lot, and not necessarily because of its sugar content, just because I find it heinous, and it's orange juice in the U.S.
Oh, interesting. Tell me about that.
I hate American orange juice.
Why do you hate American orange juice?
I don't know if it's only American. It might be just the way that it's done now. But the way that orange juice is currently produced is that it's pasteurized, right? You don't want your stock going bad. Oranges are only good for a certain part of the year. You want to preserve it so you can sell it year long. So they pasteurize them and put them in these big vats, right? The juice. But the problem is that this big vat of liquid becomes just a brownish sludge because after you pasteurize it, it basically loses all its flavor. So they have to add in orange juice flavoring after the fact, along with like pulp.
This
After the
sounds
fact.
horrible.
Are you
It's
sure?
awful.
Because when I read-
Have you ever squeezed out an actual orange and tasted the orange juice?
Yeah.
It tastes nothing like what you find from Tropicana.
It's not that far off.
It's
You're saying
pretty
the
far.
claims that Tropicana makes, where it's the carton where there's some pulp or lots of pulp labeling. That's not natural pulp from the oranges that were
No,
squeezed.
it is
It's like
pulp from the oranges. It's just they basically, I think, take out the pulp and then add it in later in certain quantities, because how can I put it? Let's say you take all the pulp.
But it
out
also
of,
says no artificial flavoring.
yeah, and well, no, they generally say not from concentrate. That's what they say.
Not for concentrate.
They say not from concentrate.
Yeah, it's actually squeezed from oranges.
Yes,
You're
which is
saying-
true. They do squeeze them from oranges. They just don't have any flavor afterwards, so they have to do something to fix that. At least that's what I've read. But it kind of meshes in with my own understanding of it, because before coming to the U.S., orange juice was just that. Juice from an orange that you would have, and you would squeeze it, and it would be difficult to make because it's annoying to squeeze oranges, but it's tasty. And I don't have that experience here. I also hate lemonade.
You ever have those chocolate oranges? It's like an orange flavored chocolates.
That's another one of my favorites.
I don't like those.
Really? Why?
I find them to taste very strange. Every time
Do
I
you
try,
like
I've tried
flavored
it.
chocolate?
I mean, I like mint. So my favorite ice cream is mint chocolate chip.
That's my favorite
No
ice
way,
cream.
Stephanie.
Guys, I think we just had a very special moment because I also love mint chocolate.
No way. This is the
We
one
all agree on
thing.
something.
One thing
Let's
we can agree
document
on.
this.
This
Can
is
I
the
just
one
say,
thing
though?
we can agree on.
For the record, everyone else I've told about this, they just tell me, ew, that just basically is toothpaste. Why would it be
I've
great
had to
eat
deal with that my entire life. It's like they don't understand. So for any listeners out there who love mint chocolate chip ice cream,
We
reach
stand
out
with
to
you.
us. We stand with you, and let's have some ice cream together one day.
Hashtag mint chocolate chip.
You know
Hashtag
what
mint
is
chocolate
the
chip.
worst with mint chocolate chip ice cream? Orange juice.
Oh my god.
Especially now after I've heard what Luisa's informed us of.
What you need to do is brush your teeth, eat mint chocolate chip ice cream, and then have orange juice. That'll
I'll
be the best.
consider that.
Or just brush your teeth at the end of those things.
Or
Yeah.
or you could do the sensible thing. But who does that?
Who does that?
sensible thing?
I gotta leave the house. Yeah. Another interesting dessert I actually enjoy is something called dipping dots. It's basically ice cream, little balls, tiny balls of ice cream that are kept frozen in, I think, nitrogen, like liquid nitrogen or something. And they're quite delicious. It's supposed to be ice cream for the future, or ice cream you can eat in space. And have you guys ever tried that?
I have. I've tried it once, I think. Although I think I don't have much of an opinion on it.
Uh-huh.
I will say that I remember reading that the current press secretary of the White House, Spicer,
Mhm.
had like a big argument about dipping dots. His Twitter account is full of him just angry at dipping dots and how they are awful and like the worst invention and not the future of ice cream.
That's probably one of the more efficient ways he spent his time, I think.
But let's not get too far into the political. I just thought that was an interesting
Well, I think
observation.
dipping dots is just so great, so that's why I think it was.
Well, it had limited. It had a limited range of places it could be sold because apparently it has to be stored at these really extreme freezing temperatures. So grocery stores don't have the freezers that go to the temperatures that dipping dots need to be stored, and so they only are sold at like theme parks.
Theme parks and also like piers of boardwalks and
Do
stuff.
movie theaters
Right.
sell a lot of dipping dots?
I don't
Or am
know
going
about that.
cra- am I
I've
crazy?
I feel like they used to.
Oh no, I'm thinking of the smaller ice cream balls that are like Snickers and things like that.
Oh, yeah, they sell those.
Thinking of those. Yeah. I don't really get anything at the concession stand that's like sugary. I've never. I think I once got candy at a concession stand, and it wasn't even for me.
Do you buy popcorn?
Popcorn.
Honestly, I don't get anything at them. I just
I mean,
feel like
I'll buy things that are salty. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm only buying popcorn. I oftentimes just get a soda, but just so I have something to drink while I'm passing the time. But yeah, I don't
Oh,
really
you're
get.
passing the time, or is the movie that bad that you're watching?
No,
I gotta
but
pass the time. This movie's horrible.
Well, I mean, every movie has its lulls.
even before I've seen it,
I'm gonna get a soda. I just know this is gonna be bad.
emergency bottle of
I
Coke.
think if I knew the movie was gonna be bad, soda is not what I'd be getting.
Remember the days, I don't know if these still are the days, when you were not allowed to bring anything into the theater? They'd check your bags.
They don't do
make
that now?
sure. Do they check your bag
I
now?
don't know.
I've never had my
people,
bag
people, you can just walk in with your bag and they
Yeah.
don't check most of the time.
But back in the day, meaning high school for me,
Yeah.
they would check your bag and make sure you're not bringing in candy you bought in an outside source.
I mean, you don't want to contaminate the pristine environment of the movie theater with outside candy. That'd be insane.
Right. Only overpriced candy allowed.
Yeah.
Maybe
I mean,
they're looking
that's their
for.
big money-making item, so it makes sense that they'd want to protect that business.
See, if they were looking for things like gum, chewing gum, because
Oh, people
you
put
know
that back in.
you
Yeah.
can put that in the floors or the back of seats, and that can cause some damage to the.
Well, when I think of movie theaters, I think of sticky floors.
Yes.
Which is probably the biggest drawback of candy in general is stickiness. The stickiness it causes on children's faces, on floors of movie theaters, like this
on your
gum,
hands,
your
on your
hands,
computer.
Yeah, everything.
I mean, that's sugar in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it tends to get everywhere and just be very sticky.
Well, I
But
mean,
that's some of the good things about it, too.
I think all foods, right? Oils, any kind of oily thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's the best?
It's hard to get out.
Like vegetables. Like a lettuce can't really.
It's just wet.
It's just wet. It's basically water.
It might have dirt, and that's about it. Yeah.
A little bit of dirt.
It's the cleanest food.
Yeah.
to
With
work
meat, you have to like burn your hands to ensure you don't have salmonella. But with
Is that your method?
Yeah, I every day when I'm cooking meat, I will just dip my hands in 300 degree Fahrenheit water. It's not even water at that point; it's just boil. I mean, it's just gas.
It's plasma.
Yeah, it's plasma. I just dip my hands in a little bit of hot plasma, and I'm good to go. Those hands will never get sick, mostly because they're not around anymore.
Also because I'm not sure hands can get sick.
You ever had a hand cold?
And cold. I feel like sugar makes people feel sick more than any other food I can imagine. Like it makes kids feel sick. They eat too much sugar. For adults, it makes them feel really tired. The older you get, if you eat sugar, you want to take a nap. It just drains you of your energy.
Well, initially it gives you a little boost of energy, right?
Yeah.
And then,
Right.
The body uses it as short-term energy.
And then you just crash.
But I think an interesting part about this is the dieting aspect. And sugar, as with any carbohydrate, has been, I think, maligned to a degree. I mean, there are definitely huge drawbacks to consuming a lot of sugar. Absolutely. But there's been a trend in the last, ever since like the Atkins diet, that anything that's a carbohydrate is
bad for you.
the most awful thing in the world and should be avoided at all cost. But it's totally fine if you eat all the fat in the world, so long as you're not having carbohydrates, right?
Are there
That's
any-
sort of
Not all
like,
the fat in the world,
yeah,
but,
but
to a
it's
moderate
a lot.
degree.
A lot of diets tend to work in that kind of like basis. Like, give up this one thing, and you can eat everything else you want, all the quantities you want, and it's totally fine.
I see desserts as the short-term reward.
They very much are. Yeah.
Dopamine or, any chemical that's released by your brain, a pleasure chemical, is a dessert in a metaphorical sense. That you're,
It's easily
Yeah.
right?
digested.
But is it necessarily a bad thing? I think that pleasure is not necessarily inherently bad.
Unless you're
And-
stoic.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly.
But I agree.
Yeah, it's not necessarily
Pleasure
bad.
is a good thing.
Yeah, it's inherently, if anything, more of a positive factor. But what the sources are for that, I think, are the big thing. Because if you're just a person that just goes through life generally happy, you perceive things as pleasurable far more often, or you take a much more positive view to these things. So I don't think anyone would give that up and say, "Oh, that's bad for you," right? That's bad form of pleasure. But obviously, if you're an alcoholic and you only really feel good when you're an alcoholic, not necessarily, but you're addicted to something and you only feel pleasure when you're doing that thing, obviously that's a negative. So it's interesting to see, like I hadn't conceived of Lent as a way of giving up that sort of thing. I don't celebrate Lent, so I'm not as close to it, but I do have friends who do, and I've always seen them like give up like cheese and things like that.
For the fat content? Why cheese?
It's usually meant to. You're supposed to give up something you really
Cheese is
enjoy,
actually
Yeah.
and that's
cheese
not
is-
necessarily.
Cheese is a really bad one, especially
Good
because
for
it's
you.
slightly addictive, like legitimately addictive. like scientifically addictive.
Oh, I love cheese so much.
Yeah.
We're talking about my addictions in this episode.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we got Ray's addictions out of the way.
Yeah. Fireworks. You're fireworks. I'm cheese. What are you, Louise?
A good book.
Yeah. Like, we'll believe that.
Grand larceny.
Best way to solve this is we'll attach like a rocket. We'll attach some cheese onto a rocket and we'll just shoot it in the sky. It's like a way to like get rid of our sins, right?
Speaking of cheese, how about dessert cheese? That's a thing.
Well, you said
That is a
cheesecake
thing.
before. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Cheesecake.
Well, yeah.
Or brie that's like baked and
Yeah.
berries. And
There's
honey.
like sweet cheeses that the like people that certain cultures make that are very tasty. These are all
Indian
things that
cheeses. They use cheese in both savory and sweet dishes.
I've never had that. I don't eat a lot of Indian food, to be honest. Mostly because I'm not a big fan of spicy food. But I have been meaning to try a little bit more of the cuisine.
There are some sweet spices too, like is it anise?
One of my favorites.
How do you pronounce it?
Anise.
Anise, is that how it's pronounced? I think
Anise?
you it in Spanish.
So anise is one of my favorite spices, I guess, if it's counted as a spice. But
Probably
it's
like herb spice. Yeah.
herb. I don't know, but it's so sweet, and like licorice root as
Well,
well has that.
Right, it's very similar to licorice. They
Sweet.
actually make
Isn't
alcoholic. They make absinthe with
Yeah,
anise as well as rakı. Rakı is it's actually a Turkish national drink, basically.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, delicious.
You're right. I hadn't considered that one. I haven't thought about absinthe in a while. There's actually there's a bar in New York that only like specializes in absinthe.
Yeah.
That I've been to a couple times. I forgot their name right now. It's like the something tavern. And they had crepes and absinthe. Like that was their menu. You could get a crepe and you get absinthe.
Wow.
Combine them. But later on, they actually changed. They shut down the crepe menu, and now they're selling hot dogs and absinthe, which is such a weird combination to me. Because one's like sort of sweet and very, very strong, and the other one's hot dogs. So
That is odd.
that is very odd.
Although I do love
mixture.
hot dogs too.
I'm not that big a fan. I think they're okay.
We should
Not a
stop recording at lunchtime when we're all thinking about food. Well, our last recording or some previous recording was early morning, and now we're at lunchtime. These are all our worst times. We should do a late night recording, maybe that'll be our Halloween.
That's when I'll
recording.
shine.
That's
when
that's
I
your best
shine.
time.
That's my best time by far. Like super late night. Yeah, I should be like a late night DJ.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I wonder what that would sound like. I think it would be interesting to hear late night. Every one of us trying to be late night DJs. And on that note, I think we're going to take a very small commercial break. On the second half, we're going to go deeper into the effects of sugar and sweets on, our country and our society. So stay tuned for that. Positive Feedback Loop. See you soon.
I'm Sam Bobbin,
And I'm Honey Apple.
and together we're Bobbin for Apple Construction Company.
Wait, I thought we were Apple for Bobbin. Well, whatever our name is, I'll tell you right now, you ain't gonna find any better candy builders out there. We make the best candy houses, candy apartment buildings, candy condos, candy gymnasiums. We even make candy roads. Now, candy roads, best kind of road. You going home, had a bad day, you can take a crack at the sidewalk. Delicious. You going home, getting chased by criminals, they're gonna get stuck on the sidewalk. Delicious. Candy roads, candy houses, candy apartment buildings, candy condos. Get it today. Bobbin for apples.
So, welcome back to Positive Feedback Loop. And I just thought we were having a conversation, basically, where I asked these guys, why do we usually eat dessert at the end of a meal, not in the beginning or in the middle?
Well, I think the classic response to that would be because, well, for one, you're desensitized if you eat sugar, right? If you have sugar, it basically changes, everything tastes bland by comparison because nothing's as sugary as sugar.
Well, it's the same reason why, not the same reason, but the whole idea of mint ice cream and then having orange juice and the orange juice tasting really bitter.
Yeah.
You just had this super sugary thing with something that's not a sugary, and now all of a sudden it tastes bitter.
And I think also we've all kind of grown up with the idea that our parents basically telling us you save dessert for later because dessert is very nutritionally terrible for you, but it's tasty. So children are incentivized to buy the dessert to eat dessert first because that's what they really enjoy. But if they have that, then they don't get the proper nutrition. So parents basically tell them to save it for last. It's a reward for you for eating a proper meal.
So maybe it's also, in a way, you're trying to make them eat as much as you can up front. So when they come to the dessert, they're less hungry.
Yeah.
So they're not eating
as much dessert. Yeah. Although, I mean, with some kids, there'll never be too much dessert.
There's also the phenomenon that you eat dinner, you're completely full, you cannot fit another thing in. I mean, you've eaten as much as you can possibly put in your stomach. And then it's dessert time. And you're ready to go.
You can make room
of
for
course,
that.
I can make room for dessert.
Yeah. I mean, generally what I'll do is I'll just split something with someone. So, because I don't feel like after dinner, I'm willing to invest enough into a full dessert for myself. So I'll get myself either a tea or a coffee, and I'll split a dessert with someone.
I agree. Not even split. I feel like desserts.
Sharing, yeah.
Desserts are more for sharing, and also it's not something to eat. Like it's not like a dessert meal. It should be like a tasting thing. I like to taste a dessert. 1 or 2 bites is like satisfactory.
Like an amuse-bouche.
Like what?
An amuse-bouche. Something to amuse your mouth.
Yes, an amuse-bouche.
You know what? I find this fascinating because not the amuse-bouche necessarily, but the fact that we're having an entire podcast about sweets, which at what point in human history would this have been feasible before now? Like we're so flooded with delicious options
Right.
that we can afford to just go into detail about our choices, our preferences for how we enjoy
Which
delicious.
desserts do we
Yeah.
want to eat?
Where
How
before it was
much of
like,
it?
before it was just you had gruel, and then maybe you found a berry or something, maybe some fruits, and maybe you could or talk about your favorite fruits. But then you probably had a really limited
about-
range of
You
selection.
can also talk about your favorite animals you like eating. That's probably a thing.
Yeah,
True.
definitely a new one as well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Although I would say that chocolate has a very ancient history. Chocolate has been around. So there are desserts, or at least things that do amuse our mouths, so to speak,
hmm
that have been around. And I think chocolate in general is really interesting. I stopped eating Hershey's Kisses and such when I learned that there were much better quality chocolates out there, that they were sourced, the cocoa beans were sourced in different ways. And I remember going through the Taza chocolate factory in
I've done that
Somerville,
too, actually.
Massachusetts. Yeah.
Very recently.
Super
So-
interesting.
I find that interesting that you mentioned chocolate as having a very long history. It does in a sense, but for Mesoamerican cultures.
Right.
It's an American. I mean, it's based on the cacao bean, and so it's an inherently American product. And I don't mean that necessarily as like American as like the U.S. I mean American as the Americas.
Yeah.
Where it's originally from, specifically Mesoamerican cultures tended to consume a lot of cacao, but it wasn't until the discovery of the Americas that it really reached what would be the palate of the rest of the world, and what would become a staple of our diet. So it's been around for a while since then, but that's maybe like 500 years, I would say.
That's still longer than big hunks have been around.
That's true. Yeah,
Longer than what?
big hunks.
Big hunks. Okay.
I would be fascinated to read more about how the access to these sweets has kind of changed over time, because I know that in the past, fruits were a big thing. We did have candies and things that were based on honey, and there were sugary drinks before. I mean, we've had honey-based alcohols forever. We've had, not necessarily saying that the previous version of it might not have been as sweet, because you have to keep in mind, what we have as a modern palate, what is available to us to a modern palate is completely different than what was available 600 years ago. Even wine tastes so different from how it did around the time of the Greeks.
So chocolate is the same way. When you walk through actually how Taza makes their chocolate, they make it in kind of a more traditional Mexican way where they use this grinding stone that was actually, I think, ground in Mexico. And they grind the cacao beans 3 times so that it remains really gritty, but as opposed to the processing that's more modern, like Swiss chocolate makers who make it so milky smooth it actually loses a lot of the chocolate flavor
Yeah.
and is replaced by the sweet and the fats and the
The
flavor
milk,
of those things. I learned that candy palettes have changed a lot in history when I first took my first tour of Brigham Young's house. So this is like the Mormon pioneers in the mid to late 1800s and how they made candies with what they had. And one of the candies that they ate a lot were horehounds, which are this, for me, the most, they taste like what they sound like. They have a horrible taste.
Wait.
Horehound lozenges.
How do you spell that?
How do you spell whore?
Hore.
Okay.
Hound.
I
had concerns.
Because I haven't tasted a. Yeah.
These are Mormons, remember? So, But these lozenges, so they made a lot of hard candy because hard candy is easier to make. You need basically, sugar or corn syrup and flavoring and whatever. But the horehound is made from the horehound herb, and it tastes disgusting. I acquired a taste to it. My dad used to really just love these. But the old Mormon pioneers also, once they got into the Utah Valley, would also make saltwater taffy, which actually started in New Jersey. It's not a Salt Lake related thing, which you would think. But
Jersey Shore, yeah.
Yeah. But they did make saltwater taffy.
As a New Yorker, I want to point out that I inherently disapprove of any pro-Jersey messages. Sorry, go ahead. It's by law. As a New Yorker, I need to say that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
But a common activity, not a common activity, but a popular activity for the Mormon pioneers once they got to the Utah Valley was taffy pulling. Because it takes kind of two people. Now taffy's pulled with machines, but it would usually take two people to kind of stretch the taffy together and get it to the consistency that it has to be taffy.
Yeah. And I think that's the fact that it required this much labor made obviously much more scarce, but also it was worthwhile when you got the actual dessert, but you had so much less exposure to sugary items other than fruits. And even then, orchards are expensive really to maintain compared to wheat, right? And an apple orchard you need a lot more land for fewer output, right? Compared to what you can get from more traditional agriculture that's not making fruits, but you're making vegetables. So it was more of a cash crop in a lot of places. And I know that in New England, apples were big, which is why you have a lot of cider.
Apple pie.
Yeah, there's like apple festivals all over the place. And there has been a component of sugary things throughout history, but the fact that we've now gotten it down to such a hard science that companies know exactly what components they need to put in a thing to get the most bang for their buck. They know just how much sugar is what they need to draw in their customers. And, well, I say sugar, but, high fructose corn syrup or whatever it is that they add. That it's basically weaponized at this point, right? I mean, anything you just add sugar and or salt to it, probably sugar or salt, you basically make it more addictive.
Right, you can also make the compounds or the molecules finer, so you can just grind it down to a really fine, volume, so there's more surface area. When you eat it, more of it is, attached onto your tongue, or exposed to your mouth and tongue, or your palate.
Yeah.
I mean, candy has also been seen as a sign of freedom or bounty for different cultures. And it reminds me of the candy bomber, who I think it was World War II, he was a pilot who would drop chocolate from his plane to the war-torn country, to the children and the people who had no access to chocolate. And so it was this treasure to them, and when they saw him fly by, they knew it was him, and they would all run knowing that this candy would be dropped. It was this sign of like the hope for freedom,
yeah,
and this idea of
The candy drone.
hope for a better world.
And in fact, actually,
Yeah, you could have a candy
with the
drone.
candy drones, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, we could use that to solve the Middle East crisis. I think that'll
Just
do it.
drop
Yeah,
candy?
just drop candy
Crunch
everywhere.
bars and
Yeah.
big hunks.
Just hunk bars?
Hunk bars.
Unfortunately, history has
hunks.
changed, right?
I think if you start dropping big hunks in the Middle East, you might have other problems. Candy and sweets have been a staple of a lot of military rations in the past as well, along with alcohol to some degree. And it's interesting how that's been one of the things to keep people motivated. Also gives you quick energy, so the
Right.
soldiers can do what they need to do.
But the motivational aspect, the sign of hope that
And it's also home.
and of home. It had more of an impact than it did at any other time. I remember when I lived in Uruguay, and there's really not that, at least at the time when I lived there, and in the small towns I lived in, there were no recognizable foods to me that I could find in the United States. And we found this one place that had imports, and they had peanut butter. And we did not care how much it cost. We were going to buy this one jar of peanut butter that was available. And we treated it like gold. I mean, it was rationed out. You can have a spoonful of peanut butter tonight. I'll have a spoonful of peanut butter tonight. It was this treasure to us.
You are describing my experience with getting here, basically. I mean, a lot. There's Goya products do a good job of standing in for a lot of traditional Cuban fare. So we were really happy that they exist. But one thing that I couldn't find outside of Goya is, for example, guava paste. Something that we would eat a lot.
What do you
on
use
road trips.
guava paste for?
Well, that's what I'm about to describe. So, something we would eat a lot when we were doing road trips in Cuba. We were traveling from Havana to Pinar del Rio to visit family or whatever. Usually like a 2-hour trip. We would stop alongside of the road because there would always be farmers selling products. They would sell things like white cheese and guava paste. And if you brought crackers along, you could put a piece of white cheese and guava paste on between two crackers, and it was delicious. That was the perfect road snack. So that was difficult to find apart from Goya products. And I remember when I first saw that, I was like super excited because that was one of the few desserts that I had relatively consistently back
So
then.
I want to try this. So
Yeah.
where do you? So you can find guava paste.
Yeah,
here.
a lot of most stores that have Goya products
have
also,
guava paste.
well, not most, but a lot of them do. You
And
can
what
find
kind
there's
of white
these.
cheese do you put with it?
I honestly don't know. I think it's just white cheese. I guess the
Probably
equivalent would be like we would call it like farmer cheese.
Maybe like a mozzarella type of cheese.
Maybe not mozzarella, but maybe
It's
like
not
an
mozzarella.
American cheese type.
No,
like
it's
cheddar, but
It's relatively bland cheese.
Yeah,
It has very
mild.
flavorless.
American cheese
It's
is very
relatively-
mild.
Yeah,
It's
but
white, mild.
it has to be relatively flavorless to kind of just balance out the sugariness of the. It's hard to describe, but I think if I were to go with you, I would probably be able to help you find it. But there's a lot of things that you don't have easy access to because we've created products that are just as good replacements for them, right? I mean, we have so much access to sweets. Who's going to come out with a guava paste and white cheese snack, right? And I mean, yeah, sure, maybe that could be your next commercial. But it's one of those things where it's a very crowded market. Getting into any sort of
Getting
snack,
into confectionery industry is huge.
it's tough.
There are some trends. I think they've talked about trends in the confectionery industry for 2017, and they've talked about this increase of putting salt in the sugary snacks. Like we love this mix now. Another one is making healthier treats or healthier candies. In some grocery stores, they sell candies that have vitamins added to them, and so there's that kind of trend as well.
Yeah, actually, I remember. There are also places that, for example, do smoothies and they add vitamins to them and things like that. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of that. I'm not sure why. We already we consume way too many vitamins at this point as a society. I think they did some studies where they found that like the water in New York State or something had insane levels of a lot of vitamins and things because people just pee it out. Yeah. You pee out most of the vitamins you consume because you get most of your vitamins from just food. You should only be taking, supplements if your doctor basically identifies that you're lacking something in your diet or you can't absorb it properly otherwise.
I feel like a lot of women lack iron, so that's one that
True.
you don't get enough of.
Yeah.
Vitamin D seems to be
Vitamin D
common
is another
deficiency.
I feel like there are deficiencies. There's
There
just
are
other
deficiencies.
vitamins you get a ton of.
But the thing is that most of even those things that are common deficiencies, you can still consume through diet. It's just that I would only suggest people consume a supplement if they've talked to a doctor about consuming it, because otherwise it's just lost value. You're peeing 99% of it away, and if you consume too much, then you can have negative side effects. I think with that, we are nearing the end of this podcast. We talked a lot about sugar, sweet, the impacts of it on children, the impacts of it on society, and our personal experiences with sweets given our different backgrounds. Hope you've had a good listen.
Have a great mint chocolate chip day.
Yes.
From
That's
us,
right.
from PFL Podcast. And
And
listen,
then brush your teeth and have some orange juice.
Stay crazy.
stay crazy.
Stay crazy.
Commercial.
Okay. Let's wait for it. All right.
What was that? Okay, wait.
That could be like an outro. Cause I had a bad day, Snickers gone down, Lollipop Town, and I'm frying up chicken wing. I said frying
Okay,
chicken
could that be the ending?
You can use all of them whenever you want.
Bye.